All right, Ryan. So, can you talk me through? Do you know when your parents realized that you had a congenital disability?
Yeah, disability is a unique topic in that, sometimes it's very present and very noticeable. But for me, in my situation, my parents early on, I was born with club foot and they knew that that existed. But that was something that there's lots of people in the world that probably had club foot at one point in their life and ended up getting it fixed, and they're your friend and you don't even know that they have that because like once you get it fixed, you're good to go. So for me, that was the only thing present. And then as most babies start to walk and bear weight, when you hold the baby, you can feel them bearing a little weight. I just wasn't doing that. And so my parents started to kind of ask some questions, started to take me to some doctors, and we started to kind of unravel what is my disability today. I think with modern technology, we've also been able to kind of identify specifically, what gene mutation happened where and what is it called. And but at the beginning, it was just like I have arthrogryposis. This is an umbrella definition, and there's lots of different forms in which arthrogryposis can show up. But now I know that I have congenital distal spinal muscular atrophy, um, which impacts the lower part of my body, and my quadriceps don't fire the way that they should. So I use leg braces to kind of uh, act in their place.
Is this in a situation where another family member had it? Was there any hereditary marker that could have, if they had known about it,
No.
dictated this?
No, actually, it was a complete genetic mutation. So when my parents got tested as well as I did for like you can do a genome test of all 10,000 plus genes, um, they did not present with what I had. So it was just a complete random act of God kind of situation, and couldn't have been one prevented, but two, and we'll probably get into this. You know, I think obviously if you have a disability, it would always be easier if maybe like I could walk and I didn't have to put braces on and daily tasks because the world is set up for people not like myself. I think obviously life would be easier, but that doesn't mean that life would be better. And I think I've had some pretty unique experiences in my life, and I think God's kind of put me just in a position where I can impact people in a different way than someone else per se that doesn't have a disability. And so I call that kind of my unique superpower. And it allows me to just be me and impact the world in the ways that I've done so far and will continue to do in the years hopefully to come.
I have kind of unintentionally started a Paralympian series on this podcast. I have had wheelchair rugby players and wheelchair basketball players and wheelchair handball players and some other Paralympians as well, but just in like the recent weeks I've done a fair amount of Paralympian interviews and like you guys are the coolest. You really are. Like I try not to fangirl because like you guys are professionals and I'm a professional, but I am in awe of every story that I've gotten to tell, and I'm excited to get to tell yours.
Well, yeah, Paralympians, I think we're the best well-kept secret, and I don't know how much longer it'll be a secret. We'll talk about it here on the podcast, but we have started a media collective that we are looking to raise and amplify the voices of Paralympic athletes and parasport. And I think that um, the time is right and the opportunity is ripe for those stories to be shared and for fandom to be built within the United States of America and the world.
When you were growing up, were you the only one who was using leg braces in your elementary and middle and high school?
Yeah, I think I wasn't the only person with a disability, but I was the only person, wearing leg braces or participating in adaptive sports. And so for me, um, parasports were really my outlet, and but I played 2.5 hours away from where I lived, and so most people get to kind of play in their hometown under the Friday night lights, and I get to play with their friends from the school in which they go to. And that necessarily wasn't the case for me, but it actually was. I played wheelchair basketball. That's the one sport that for me I fell in love with and was really good at and had a lot of success in. But I also played wheelchair tennis and actually competed on our high school team through that. So still some bridges within that space that I was able to make connections with just the local high school that I went to. But yeah, only one and kind of charted my own path, I would say, early on in my childhood.
It's interesting that you bring up cross training with wheelchair tennis because the other wheelchair Paralympians that I've interviewed have played wheelchair football and wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby and wheelchair tennis, and they're multi-sport Paralympians. And I just think that that's not something that we see a lot in able-bodied sport at an elite level. So like y'all are not only incredible at one sport, but your athletic ability spans a couple sports. How do you narrow that down on what you want to go and be elite at?
I think for me, it was more about a combination of try as many sports as you can to see, what you fall in love with. But I think at the same time, it's f for basketball specifically, I had someone very early on see potential in myself, um, and speak that out into existence. And there's a power that happens when someone sees potential that you don't even see within yourself. And the power of belief takes you from like where you are to where you want to go. Because when a team believes that they can win, when a person believes that they can achieve something, that motivation and that extra oomph, I think, allows you to find more success. And that was basketball for me. So not only was it the freedom of mobility, but not only was I having some success, but I had mentors and people along the journey that spoke belief in who I could become and saw what I could achieve before I ever achieved it. And I think that that was kind of the X factor for me in specializing in wheelchair basketball.
I mean, your introduction to wheelchair basketball I saw was in 2002. What was happening in your life at that point? How old were you? And what did that introduction to the sport look like?
I had to like do math in my head. I'm like, okay, 2002, 1994. I was 8 years old. But at 8, I think for me, I just grew up in a sports family, an athletic family. My dad coached high school soccer for 30 years, played D2 soccer. My sister played soccer. We're sports junkies. Like if you're just kind of turning on the TV, we're typically watching some type of sport or competing in some type of way in our household. And so for me, as I was growing up, I just competed with any sport that was in our local area, but my body couldn't do what my brain was telling it to do. Like I felt like I could be the most athletic person on the field, but I'd hit the ball in baseball to the outfield that would be like a double or a triple and I'd get to first base, right? And so you could just tell that like what I was playing wasn't made for me. And we were looking for something and there was a newspaper article about wheelchair basketball and it never hurts to go try something. That's something that I would always encourage anyone is don't knock it till you try it and put yourself out there and some of the things that you thought you'd never love, you try and they become some of your biggest passions in life. And so trying things never hurts and we went to this clinic and at this clinic there was an opportunity to hop in a chair and try wheelchair basketball for the first time. And I think when I hopped in the chair, like it clicked. My body could do what my brain was telling it to do. And I think at that moment, that's the power of sport, right? Because it builds something inside of you, a passion that can last a lifetime and that can change the trajectory of the disciplines you create and the person that you become and the people that you meet and the impact and legacy that you can leave. And so I never knew that when I was 8 years old. I was just trying to find something that I could enjoy and like and stay physically active. And I had awesome parents that just put me in the right positions at the right time in the right environments for me to really figure out, what was going to be best for Ryan Neiswender throughout the journey.
I saw that you had been quoted as saying that watching the London Games, wheelchair basketball, served as an inspiration to get involved on a more serious level.
Yeah, visibility of pair sport is just non-existent. One, even now, pair sport is more than just a once every 4 year thing. And only in the past decade has it even been able to be watched once every 4 years. And I remember London being that first moment where I was actually able to find a live stream to watch maybe the guys that I had looked up to and played for so long. And I saw the fans in the stands and I saw the emotions that they went through. And the same way that 10-year-old wants to be an NBA player when they say like, who do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do? That was my moment where it was like, I want to be a Paralympian. I want to compete on Team USA. I want to win gold medals. Um, but London was a great catalyst to where we are today. But I do believe that we are still really far from where we want to be. And we need to change so that future Ryans don't have to wait for a once every 4 year event to come and find their dreams and make them a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to an athlete a few days ago about how there's this vibe that surrounds the Olympics and the Paralympics and the excitement that is inherently there if you are a sports fan to any degree. But then there's the rest of the quad. And as spectators, we're like, oh, we'll see you in 4 years. But there are so many other championships and tournaments going on in that quad that like the average spectator doesn't take into account when they're deciding who to root for at the Olympics. What would you say about the physical toll in that quad outside of the Olympics of wheelchair sports?
You know, if you're an Olympian or Paralympian, you're not doing it because you're making tons of money. You're doing it because you just have a passion to not only be the best at what you do, but like represent your country. And like within those 4 years, I would say Olympians and Paralympians probably feel most misunderstood because we come off these pinnacle highs after Olympic and Paralympic games, and then we go into the valley of like, I just won a gold medal, but everybody at the grocery store has no idea what I just experienced. Like, and I don't even know how to explain that to them, right? Nor if they did know who I was, would they be able to follow my sport, my season outside of with my club team, become fans of that and grow the fandom around maybe what they experienced during the games. And so I think for us as athletes, it's when you feel misunderstood and you ride these highs and lows, um, it's a dangerous place to be in terms of like if you're not taking care of yourself from like a mental health perspective and surrounding yourself with support systems that allow you to have space to kind of like I would say celebrate in the highs and grieve in the lows. Um, but I don't think that that's where our sports need to live or where our sports or the story of our sport should end. And I think with the Olympics and Paralympics, we've settled for the once every 4 year moments, but I think we have an opportunity to break through and showcase that these sports happen every week of every year and you can become fans of them right now in the moment.
When we're looking at the impact of parasport on the world stage, where do you think we are now, and where would you like to see the outreach?
I think we're far from where we need to be, but I think we're further along than we've ever been. And what I mean by that is the people that have championed the Paralympic movement from the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, that's why we are where we are today. And we're walking through paths that have never been paved, overgrown grass and fields that we have to cut down and showcase what's behind um, all the bushes. But our ability to uh, amplify Paralympic athlete voices, to provide a platform for stories to be told in a way in which it isn't just an inspiration, but it's an athlete that is able to just be seen as an athlete. That they like, well, I would love to watch wheelchair basketball get covered, where they're just talking about Steve Sirio's triple double and how on the past 5 games he's been on a historic tear like never before. And they never mention he is in a wheelchair, and we do need to see disability. That is absolutely true. But it's not just impressive that he's shooting a basketball from a chair. It's just impressive that he's putting up a triple double against the world's best elite athletes. And we're covering that sport. We're covering that what he's doing, not his circumstance that he's in. And I think that once we start to do that, once we start to change the narrative around para sport, I think perception of disability in society will change as well. And you don't have to be like if you're disabled, that doesn't mean that you're a Paralympian. But I think that Paralympians can help change the narrative around what is possible in our society for people with disabilities.
Oh, absolutely. Let's go here right now. Can you tell me about Cultured and what went into your exec board? I mean, you guys are incredible. You have an incredible group of four that are working to amplify these voices. How did you select this group? And what do you think is possible with an outlet like this?
So, Cultured is a media collective that we are looking to change the narrative around parasport. The name Cultured is comes from we are looking to culture the uncultured around Paralympic sport and parasport, and we want to eliminate the un from society. I think, you talked about the team, and we do have an incredible team, and I think that's why I believe we are going to be able to change the narrative. I think that you asked how we all came together, and it was, four individuals having the same thoughts and then connecting dots of, oh, you're thinking this too, and you think we should do something like this? Well, what if we all came together and as a collective, we changed the narrative? Um, and it started with Danny Arovich. She was doing a Paralympic Roundup series on her personal channel. And I reached out and I said, hey, this is super cool. Is there any way that we could partner together on this? Because I think that we need to have like a central place where we can build fandom and share the stories of the Paralympic movement. And she said, that's actually funny. Danny said that Brenna also had reached out about a very similar thing. And so we had all three met. We started talking that we wanted to do something. This was about 4 months ago. And as we were ideating on these things, Chuck's been doing a lot of great work within this space. And we asked him if he would want to be involved. And it just aligned with his values and his mission and what he's trying to accomplish. And we're better together than we are apart. And that's really what we want our collective to be. The cultured collective is one where we don't want to be fragmented and saying this is ours, you can't have any of it. But we want athletes to come into the collective, to join the movement. We want to amplify their voices. We want to showcase what's going on, such as this weekend, we have amputee um, competitions happening, and we have the Chicago Marathon going on where there's racers, and we want to be able to be the one-stop shop where you get to find out about Paralympic sports and para sports that are happening in the area. We want you to hear about athletes and their stories and what they're doing and how they're training and who you should be following on social media on individual channels. And we want to culture the world so that by the time Milan 26 comes and LA 28 comes, that the world and specifically for us, the United States of America, uh, is educated, excited, and ready to watch the Paralympics like never before.
That's incredible. I mean, I do feel like that's an area of sports coverage as a whole that is significantly lacking. Um, like I work in sports media. Like I know
Yeah.
what gets coverage, and I I just kind of, like I was saying, stumbled into this kind of Paralympic series on this podcast. And so I started reaching out to all of these track athletes and wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby and wheelchair tennis. And I struggle finding information about you guys. And I always pull my questions from public knowledge. So articles that have been written or podcasts that have been done about you guys. And some of your sports just simply don't have much coverage at all. Like Google just does not pull results. Like I feel like there should be. Um, how do you want culture to fill in that gap?
I think you've presented exactly the the problem in which we are looking to solve. And I just posted something on my personal Instagram account where Nick Mayhew highlighted that during the Olympic and Paralympic Games, ESPN posted 439 times around the Olympics and 3 times around the Paralympics. Like, how do we expect people to build fandom and even know that things are going on or existing if the very media outlets in which should be covering these sports are not doing it? I would even say at an equitable level, they're not doing it at all. And I think what's happening in women's sports and the women's movement within basketball, and you're seeing, volleyball leagues pop up. It's about time that that's happening, but um, it's happening also because a lot of the superstars in the men's league, such as LeBron James, Steph Curry, Jason Tatum's, they're pointing to the women and saying, you should go follow them. You should watch them. I'm going to invest in them. I'm going to show up to their sports. And as that happens, high tide lifts all boats. But we're just not seeing that within the Paralympic movement. And so we're going to own our stories. We are creating culture to take back our athlete stories and share them in a way in which it's going to get people's attention. And we're going to do it through podcasts. We're going to do it through social channels. We want to do docuseries. We want to do it through merchandise. We believe that fashion and sports transcend culture. And through our merch line, through our social media avenues of talking about the sports that are going on, we believe consistency. We believe a space where someone like yourself could go to become educated on maybe some of the people that you want to cover or you should be covering within this space, that you have a place to go. We want to have thought leadership around how you can activate, Paralympics and para athletes and para sports within your companies um, throughout the year, not just once every 4 years. And we want to educate people through disability 101 courses where we can all be speaking from the same language, the same song sheet, and we can really um, create a unified approach to how we bring visibility to something that is way, way, way overdue.
Man, I love that I get to talk to people like you because it's one thing to see a deficit in coverage. It's another to go, I am qualified to do this
Yeah.
coverage. So let's create this thing. Let's stock it full of a C-suite that rocks, and let's fill this gap ourselves. I mean, that's really incredible. I'm like so excited to keep
Yeah,
following.
I think we've said, if not us, then who? And our number one goal is to show the world the value proposition of parasports. We are not a charity. We are not something that you should feel bad for. We are elite athletes with a wide variety of sports that are engaging, entertaining, and are going to have wow factor that the world has never seen before. And so we're going to showcase that. We're going to elevate that. We want to also build up the next generation of athletes. So mentoring them in how to be content creators, how to, position your brand so that other companies become interested and want to partner with you. Um, and it isn't going to just happen overnight. It could, but we believe that, consistency and it's not us. It's not the me. It's not like the four people that are starting this. It's the we. It's the together. It's the collective group that if we use all of our resources, if we use all of our networks, if we um, focus on the team being all people that want to help amplify para sport, I think that's how the narrative has changed.
Yeah. Speaking of incredible legacies of sport, let's take a step back to your college experience. I mean, a four-time collegiate All-American. What was the recruiting process like? And I mean, when did you know that you were going to go four for four?
One thing that I think we've done a really good job of in the United States of America is in wheelchair basketball specifically, we have done a great job of setting up the right infrastructure for uh, collegiate sports and wheelchair basketball. I think, don't quote me on this, but we have over 10 colleges around the country that are that have wheelchair athletics and wheelchair basketball specifically.
I think it's
And
11.
so it was the first time in my life where during the recruitment process, I felt like I was being treated like any other athlete. When I walk into a gym at the YMCA and I have a wheelchair, all people see is the chair, and they don't see the eliteness in which I'm playing, like the sport that I love. But when I was recruited, that was the first time where I'm going on 5 or 6 recruiting trips. I'm getting phone calls from coaches every week trying to talk me into the value proposition of why I should join their team and their program and their culture that they're building. And I loved every second of it because I think I felt for the first time like all my hard work was being recognized and seen. Um, Simultaneously, I was fortunate enough when I was a senior in high school. Um, so 2012 was the London Games, and then 2013 they brought in a new coach named Ron Likens, and he was the University of Missouri's head wheelchair basketball coach. So he had been recruiting me from uh, a collegiate perspective, and he had been watching my game. And then I applied to get a tryout for the senior men's national team and was fortunate enough to get it. Had a really good tryout, and I made my first national team as an 18-year-old in high school. And I think at that moment, I recognized that the hard work that I'd put in and the consistency that I had within my game was not just ready for the collegiate level, but it was ready for the world stage. And not that you ever expect to one go four for four within the collegiate system because there's tons of great players within that space. But I thought the possibility existed as long as I continued to be diligent and disciplined in the work and the preparation that I did. I also had great teammates at the University of Illinois that set me up for success. And I think it was the combination of the love for the game, the people I was doing it with, and then the experiences that I had had on the international stage, helping to translate into really good results at the collegiate level.
So simultaneously, I mean, that entire collegiate experience, you were in contact with Team USA,
Yep.
right? You were going to training camps. Um, what happened in Rio? I saw that you missed out on
Yeah.
Rio.
Yeah. I think one of the things
I
that's
think you
really,
like alluded to it in your TED Talk.
yep. Yeah.
Can you
So,
talk me through what that training camp looked like?
yeah. So, um, one of the most interesting things just in general about Team USA is that arguably speaking, in some sports, it's harder to make the team than it is to like maybe go medal at a games. And that's just because in certain sports, we have been so dominant for so long. Um, and a lot of people that are trying out for Team USA, they could probably go try out for another country and have success in becoming a Paralympian. And maybe in the States, they would never be a Paralympian just because of how difficult it is to make the team. That isn't to take anything away from how difficult it is just to be a Paralympian and how hard it is to make any national team from any country. It's more just to say that uh, we have a stacked group of athletes that are ready to take your position if you're not willing to put the work in. And I alluded to at 18, I made my first national team, and I think there's a beauty in that because you see success early and you get experiences that other people just don't, which continue to be the catalyst to maybe create a larger gap between you and your competitors. But I think simultaneously, you are immature and you do stupid things when you're young that maybe you would regret later in life. And for us, I made the team, we won gold, and I had started in 2013 for the World Championship qualifier in Bogota, Colombia. But then 2014 came around and we had a training camp in Savannah, Georgia, and a couple of us broke team rules and left the campus when we weren't supposed to leave. And next thing you know, I think one thing that Ron likens, and I really respect this about him, is um, he builds a culture through keeping and sticking to his word. And so, when you break team rules and you know kind of the consequences of what that is, he's just going to implement it. And he doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care what you've done. He's going to always protect the culture that he's building. And realistically, what he did from 2013 to 2021 in winning back-to-back gold medals, he changed an entire country's culture within our sport. And so, yeah, unfortunately, didn't make 2014. You also, when you don't go, you give someone else an opportunity to have success. And I was an alternate then for Rio based on the guy that took my place in that 2014 time had a great tournament and built the chemistry kind of with the lineups, and it was tough to crack the code to make the team in 2016. But it was the motivator, and it also matured me in a lot of ways to come after Tokyo like never before.
Yeah, I have an episode coming out with Rob Taylor in a few months, and so we were talking about the dynasty that wheelchair basketball is living in right now, and how it is like impossible to crack that code to get on that roster when he has athletes that have been on the team for 4 Olympics. I
Yeah.
mean, these are like lifetime Paralympians. And I mean, knowing what the team was comprised of in terms of stature and tenure, what was it like to make the team ahead of Tokyo?
Yeah, it is very difficult to crack the code on Team USA. And I think that's actually a really good thing. And there's power in that because hopefully that spurs on more competitiveness and people continue to kind of work on their craft so that they are striving to be the Steve Sirios of the world. Because if we can just continually create a culture to build Steve Sirios, then I think we're doing pretty well. Um, but to make the team, uh, I just took a deep breath. Like, I think for me, my first big goal was to become a Paralympian. And while I am very good at this sport, sometimes you ask yourself, am I ever going to crack the code to finally make like my first games? And when you actually hear your name called and you get that opportunity and then you go and start in the Paralympics, um, it is a dream come true and you can kind of just take a deep breath for a couple seconds and just like sit in that you did it and that you accomplished it. And then the next phase is like, okay, and now we gotta like go win this thing. We gotta uh, step one check, step two still in progress. So it is a humbling experience, especially that 2020 team was just loaded with future Hall of Famers, and to be in the same sentence as those other 11 guys is something that I'll never take lightly.
When you guys won the gold and the women won the bronze, what do you think the impact for future wheelchair basketball outreach is when you have a team that's not only dominant in the men's game but also in the women's as well?
I wish it was more than it was. Like it sounds like you win, so there would be a bigger impact, you know? Um, but I think that's the problem with our society. And that's going, not to keep going back to the business, but that's why culture exists, is that we've won three golds and no one knows about it. Like, what? You know, Steph Curry wins one gold and everybody can talk about his moments that he had in the games, but no one's talking about Jake Williams being the MVP of the league and being the best shooter in the world and having a historic Paris Paralympic Games. Why? It's not coming to funding. So I'm worried about our pipeline within the wheelchair basketball. And I think it's because like the visibility isn't there, the support structure isn't there from a financial perspective, and uh, without something like a cultured, I don't know how that narrative is changing. I think everybody's just waiting around hoping that somehow it changes. And that's the problem. Like the fact that Steve Serio has been to five Paralympic Games, three-time gold medalist, four-time medalist, SB winner, and I hate followers on social media. I hate that that is like how you have your like clout in this world, but I also understand that it is such a pivotal part in getting brand deals and building awareness, and followers just means more people have eyes on what you're doing. Yeah, I think within the Paralympic movement, you would think that like back to back to back gold medals would change and have ripple effects that would change the course of history within wheelchair basketball. And yet you've got the Steve Serios that are five-time Paralympians, four-time medalists, three-time gold medalists, SB winner. I could keep going on and on and on. And just a great human being, and a great leader. And yet within that, all those things that I just said about Steve Serio, he has 12,000 followers and very few people know him. And what I mean by that is like lots of people know him within the parasport world, but I'm talking about like the people that don't even know about the Paralympics, right? Like, and I just think that that's the issue is that where would you go to follow Steve Serio, and some of his highlights? Like, how do I find Steve Serio wheelchair basketball highlights? How do I find Jake Williams wheelchair basketball highlights? LeBron doesn't have to post about himself. It just happens. And the NBA and USA basketball, like they have the money and they have the support system to build the structures to train up the next generation of athletes and coaches within the youth development program so that they can have sustained success. But wheelchair basketball doesn't have that. And it is insane that we've probably actually lost funding while winning more gold medals. Like I think we have less funding every year and yet we still win. And so the narrative needs to change. And I think that it does start by visibility and fandom and educating people on the sport and showcasing the elite athletes on display.
I mean, I saw that wheelchair basketball is played in more than 108 countries, and you guys continue to take World Cup golds and World Championship golds and Paralympic golds. I mean, you are in a league of your own when it comes to this sport. What what would you say to broadcast affiliates who may be hearing this podcast and going, "Oh wow, there is a deficiency."
I think the only way that people can become fans of something is if they know where to follow it. And I believe that our ability to amplify the message will help tap into, we talk about value propositions within the Paralympic movement all the time. There's $13 trillion worth of spending power globally. 15% of the world have a disability. 85% of people are more likely to buy from brands that uh, support inclusive, um, just anything that is inclusive around things with disabilities and people with disabilities. And I think that um, all those things are great, but the reason why no one's able to tap into it is because no one can watch it and no one can, there's no bridge to say, here's the value proposition, here's the asset. How do people, like, how do we bridge the gap to showcase, like, to actually tap in to the value proposition? And I don't think we've cracked the code yet. And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, but I believe that like we need someone, and that someone is cultured to bet that like we can collectively raise the awareness high enough to prove out the value proposition of parasport.
Yeah. I mean, when you won the World Championship gold in 2023 in Dubai, what kind of accolades did you come home to? I mean, that was after you had won a gold in Tokyo and then COVID had happened, but you were still competing, obviously.
Yeah.
You when you came back
Yeah.
from Dubai, what were you met with?
Work on Monday. I mean, not a whole lot, right? I mean, most people, not only was it on a different time zone, so that makes it a little bit more difficult for people to follow, but you had to like find the random live stream, like in the random time zone. And the only people that really would have found that would have been people that follow us on social media where we're posting those things. There's no like third party media outlet that's showcasing even where the live, even if they're not going to broadcast it themselves, just showcasing like where the live stream is to be able to follow those things, um, didn't exist. And so we never, I think the truth is like we, like my teammates and Paralympians and parasport athletes, like you never do it for the notoriety, but it is pretty hard to come back to a, a hometown and a space and a place where, arguably speaking, no one understands the thrill of a lifetime that you just went on and how much time, effort, and energy went into it. So you can feel pretty misunderstood. And I just think, more than anything, I just think, man, the world is like missing out on something really cool. And I wish people could see it the way that I see it. And I wish the hardest part is when people do see it that way, they instantly get hooked and become fans. But it's such like a one by one thing versus if we brought more visibility and we could reach more of the masses, I think very quickly you would see the hundreds and the thousands of people falling in love with the thing that we've loved for so long.
Can you talk to me, sorry, about wheelchair basketball classification and what classifies you as a two?
So classification, we could go down a rabbit hole, and every sport, just a caveat, is has similarities and differences within their classification systems. So I'm not going to sit here and try to explain every sport's classification system. I know that wasn't your question, but I do think it is something that, when we build fandom, we do have to explain kind of some of the nuances that make the playing field as fair as possible. It's not a perfect system. There are a lot of conversations around how we could make it better. But the way that wheelchair basketball is set up is there's a classification system. It's a point system, and it's based off of functionality. So those that have higher functionality when it comes to movement, think about maybe an amputee that's a below the knee amputee has all of its core has all of his or her core function, is able to catch balls outside of maybe their cylinder and bring them back without losing their balance. They're going to be a 4.5. And then you have people all the way down to class ones, and class ones have the least function, and maybe they're paralyzed higher up in their waist, and they, if the ball is not thrown kind of directly in their cylinder, they'll lose their balance or they won't be able to catch the ball. They aren't able to get as much power on their push because they can't use all the same muscles that someone at a 4.5 would be able to use. So it goes 4.5 down to 1 at a half point increment. So 4.54, 3.53, all the way down to 1. And then what gets unique is you can only have 14 points collectively between 5 players on the floor at a time. And so there's a lot of unique lineups and ways that coaches have to think strategically about what lineups work best together that equal 14 points or less. And that's the unique part of the chess match that I would say is wheelchair basketball. And coaches typically, at a certain point, they'll have it memorized, but oftentimes they'll either have a coach on the sideline with a whole sheet of all the possibilities that they could run within the team that they have. Um, and that really allows for, the 4.5 Brian Bells of the world to be on the floor at the same time that, the 1.0 John Boys they're both on Team USA and start. They're there at the same time. They both have the opportunity to play the sport that they love, and they're the best at what they do at the classifications that they are. And so that's the classification system in a nutshell. Obviously, I'm a 2.0, as you mentioned, and classification is done through, occupational therapists or people that have been certified that have professional degrees to understand medical records and disability and be able to evaluate athletes. Mine's a little unique in that I would typically probably be a 3.0 actually, but my C1 and C2 in my spine is fused and I can't turn my neck barely at all. And so when you're playing defense and you're trying to check your shoulders, it's definitely a disadvantage. And they've taken off a half point for each, which brings me down to a 2.0.
Why did you have to get your spine fused?
I have part of my disability, I have a narrowing of my spinal canal. And so as I was going to grow up near the C1 and C2 level, my spinal cord wasn't going to grow. It was going to continue to grow as the canal didn't. And so it would have eventually severed my spine. And they fused the C1 and C2 so that obviously the severing of the spine wouldn't happen, yet there would still be stability within my neck. And I could function in everyday life just as I am. So it was early on. I was 3 years old when it happened, so I don't really remember much. Um, but that was kind of the diagnosis.
Wow. Let's talk about your TED Talk. I listened to it. It was just incredible. How did you get that opportunity? How did you know what your approach was going to be? And then what's your relationship with things that you hate, situations that you hate?
So TEDx is unique in that TEDx, every city is like an independent, it's almost like franchised. So they're independently run TED conferences. But they do get to put their own kind of spin following obviously the guidelines with that TED puts out there. And in Charlotte, you tried out. So you kind of pitched your story in like your elevator 1 minute pitch. And then if they liked you, you got brought to the final round where you kind of broadened your talk and maybe did like a short version of what you were thinking about doing. And then they picked 9, 10 people to make it to kind of like the stage, they called it. But that happened, in May. I got selected. And then not until October was the actual TED Talk. And during that time, they gave us a speaker coach that helped us refine our message and think about common threads that we can kind of pull out. And initially, my talk was more on what if our biggest insecurities could become our greatest assets? And we started talking about, some of the nuances of TED Talks is the one-line zingers that really catch people's attention and maybe aren't your traditional titles or words that you would put together in a sentence. And so when you hear like loving what you hate, it builds and breeds curiosity to say, I have no idea what that means, but I would love to learn more. And within the process of kind of building those things out, one thing that was really important is, my lived experience is that I have a disability and I've had to like love some things about myself that I used to hate, right? But within that process, like you may not have a disability. And if I'm not able to draw the common thread between you and I, like haven't we all been there? Can't we all relate? If I just talk about my disability, people will leave my talk and say, well, that's great for him because like I can't relate to that. And so I used a story around normalizing the moment in scary movies. And I think we've all that are listening to the podcast have watched a scary movie at some point in our life. And that first time when that scene comes and your heart's beating out of your chest, anticipating, the moment and what's actually going to happen, the music's picking up, it's getting a little eerie. That happens every time that we watch a scary movie for the first time. But if we watch that scene again and again and again, maybe with friends that asked you to watch the movie the second time, by the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth time, the scene is no longer scary. And it's because you've normalized the moment and you've disarmed the very thing you once feared. And my hypothesis is that freedom and space open up on the other side of the things that we hate the most. And so for me, I spent so much time trying to hide from my disability and ignore that it existed. And hopefully people didn't see it. But when I started to like accept my disability and start to love it and embrace it and use it as we talked about earlier, as an X factor and a differentiator for me to be able to be more memorable, to be in rooms that maybe I wouldn't be otherwise. Freedom and space opened up on the other side of that, and I had like a whole other third of my life back that I could use for things that I never had time for before because I was so caught up and worried and consumed by what other people were saying and hopefully people weren't seeing. And it all stemmed from like I didn't even love myself. Um, and so I just believe that everybody has that within themselves. There's something, whatever that thing is for you, that you might not like and you wish people would never find out. And so you try to hide it and you avoid it. But if we play that scary scene over and over again, if we embrace it, if we normalize it, if we speak it out into existence, it might actually be that one thing that thing that catapults you to the places that you could have never dreamed.
When did you start loving yourself?
I think I started to really come into my own, you know, sophomore year of college. I think it was a moment where I recognized that, this is me and I have a lot of value to bring to this world. And I don't want to like hide behind my disability or try to like the biggest compliment that I would ever get would be, I don't even notice that you have a disability, you know? And now I'm like, I hope you do, because that's a huge part of who I am. And that shouldn't mean you treat me any different, but it should mean that you see it and you see me with my disability, and there is something to that. There's a beauty in that. And so once I started to do that, I think my confidence started to build a little bit. And I started to enter into, more speaking engagements. I started to uh, myself out there probably more with dating. And there's one of my mentors, and you could use this for dating, you could use this for networking, you could use this for anything you want. The free tip of the day is write down SW, 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 SW. Some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting. And I just think that when we stop caring what people think and we start to embrace, like love who we are, um, freedom and space opens up and you're willing to be bolder and you're willing to take bigger swings and you really don't care like what the noise is around you because like you know who you are and you know how you present yourself. And as long as you have that common thread of that you're not compromising who you are, um, I think good things will just happen.
Speaking of good things, what's next for you?
What's next? It's a good question.
A loaded question, so answer
It is a
however
loaded
you
question.
think.
Well, my wife is pregnant, so we're expecting in December. So that's
Congratulations! Oh my
exciting.
God.
Baby boy. I'll
Wow.
be becoming a parent, which will be super exciting. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously, cultured is a big part of what we're looking to do. I have my full-time job at Visa where I work in sports sponsorship marketing, and I want to be able to make an impact in the space of the Olympic and Paralympic movement from the corporate America side. Visa does an awesome job of supporting athletes, and I want to continue to be a champion of that and continue to be a consultant for change of things that we can kind of do to continue to improve the way that we support the movement and athletes in the process. And then my wife and I just got plugged into a great local church. So we're going to probably do some volunteering with that and maybe lead a small group and some of those things. We love boating. We live near a lake in South Carolina. So those are some of the big things. Basketball is always a huge part of my life. I think with a kid, I'm going to take a step back for at least a year or two and then reevaluate, does this make sense to kind of make a run for LA? But at this time, I'm not necessarily even thinking about that. I always stay in shape. I love to work out, love to lift. I'm playing on a local team here in Charlotte, North Carolina for in the NWBA, which is the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. So I'm doing all those things, but not specifically training for an international event with Team USA at this exact current moment.
Is there anything else that you think that I missed about telling your story? I am done with my questions.
I think you nailed it. I think my biggest thing is that I would just encourage people to help us become a part of the solution. If you're a Paralympic sports fan, that's awesome. And we want you to follow Cultured and we want you to follow athletes that we amplify and build your fandom for all the awesome athletes that are out there. But I also believe that we need to reach the people beyond the people that are already fans of the Paralympic and parasport movement. And to do that, we need to use everybody's network collectively to amplify the message. And so anything that your viewers and listeners can do to kind of help us without that process, grab your merch, grab your swag, rock it everywhere, tell people about our mission, and let's change the world and change the narrative around Paralympic sport.